So, the new season of House of the Dragon is finally here. Do you remember what happened last season? Every single detail? If not, do not worry. I have brought you a complete, detailed recap of Season 2. It will refresh your memory and make watching the new season even more enjoyable. Everyone is excited for the new season of House of the Dragon. And why wouldn't they be? The last season ended by teasing the Battle of the Gullet. I am a massive fan of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, so this recap is from me, to a fellow fan like you, containing all the important details you need to know before watching Season 3. There are some things you should keep in mind. For instance, the Stark army is known to be incredibly strong, because they are hardened by the brutal northern winters. The legitimacy of Rhaenyra's strong sons is always questioned, and dragon riding requires Targaryen passion, even more than Targaryen blood. Do not forget any of this. So, without worrying about spoilers, let us begin. The first episode of Season 2 begins at the Wall. Here, Jaehaerys, who has come to remind the Starks of Winterfell of their oaths, meets Cregan Stark. Cregan explains that he cannot send his main forces yet, but he has 2,000 Winter Wolves, who are far more dangerous than a standard army. On the other side, Rhaenys is keeping watch over the Gullet on her dragon, Meleys, alongside the Velaryon shipping blockade. Just then, Daemon approaches Rhaenys and tells her to take her dragon and fly with him and Caraxes to eliminate Aemond and Vhagar to avenge Lucerys' death. But Rhaenys refuses because Rhaenyra was not there. Rhaenyra has flown out on her dragon to search for the bodies of Lucerys and his dragon, Arrax. Near Shipbreaker Bay, she finds a piece of Arrax's remains and Lucerys' clothes, and when she finally returns to Dragonstone, she says only one thing. She wants Aemond Targaryen. Meanwhile, Aegon II Targaryen is listening to his small folks' grievances and trying to resolve them, but his hand, Otto Hightower, explains that in a state of war, they cannot give everyone everything they want. Meanwhile, Aegon, whose father Viserys never brought him to a small council meeting, brings his young son and heir Jaehaerys into the small council. On the other hand, Larys Strong is exploiting Alicent's fears. Alicent is consumed by guilt over Lucerys' death, and she tells Otto that war should only be waged if absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, Mysaria arrives at Dragonstone from King's Landing. After her establishment was burned down, Daemon captures her and throws her into the dungeons, but later offers her freedom. In exchange, Mysaria helps Daemon find 2 assassins. These were Blood, a guard in the City Watch, and Cheese, a rat catcher. They infiltrate the Red Keep to take Aemond's life, but they cannot find him. Instead, they enter Queen Helaena's room. They demand to know which child is the son, and then they murder young Jaehaerys. Helaena immediately grabs her daughter, Jaehaera, and runs to the chambers of the Queen Mother, Alicent, who was in a delicate position with Criston Cole. Helaena enters and delivers the devastating news. Her son is dead. The murder of Prince Jaehaerys causes absolute chaos. Aegon immediately summons the small council, demanding vengeance against Rhaenyra, but his hand, Otto, suggests they first hold a public funeral procession. This would win them the sympathy of the people of King's Landing and show the realm how cruel Rhaenyra truly is. The funeral procession begins with a herald crying out, "Rhaenyra the Cruel," while crowds of sympathetic citizens gather for Queen Helaena and Alicent. Meanwhile, Blood is captured. Under interrogation by Larys, he confesses that Daemon hired him alongside an unknown rat catcher. At Dragonstone, Rhaenyra learns about the funeral procession. She confronts Daemon, asking if he ordered this. Daemon explains he only sent assassins to kill Aemond, but Rhaenyra does not believe him. She tells him that she can no longer trust him. In a rage, Daemon leaves for Harrenhal to gather support for Rhaenyra. Elsewhere, Aemond feels regret over Lucerys' death, but is also pleased that Daemon views him as a worthy enemy, sending assassins after him. Meanwhile, with Aegon's approval, Criston Cole sends Sir Arryk, one of his Kingsguard, to Dragonstone. Arryk is disguised as his twin brother, Sir Erryk, planning to take his place, infiltrate Dragonstone, and assassinate Rhaenyra. At Dragonstone, Rhaenyra grants Mysaria her freedom, but on her way out, Mysaria recognizes Sir Arryk and immediately alerts the guards. Arryk enters Rhaenyra's chambers and is about to strike. When the real Sir Arryk bursts in, a brutal duel begins between the twin brothers. They trade blows, exchanging bitter words, until finally, Erryk kills his brother, Arryk, overcome with grief at his brother's death. Erryk takes his own life. In King's Landing, Aegon publicly hangs all the city's rat catchers. Otto Hightower is furious, telling him that the public sympathy they had gained has been completely ruined. But Aegon insists he wanted revenge. Right then, he strips Otto of his position and names Sir Criston Cole as his new hand. In the Riverlands, the long-feuding Brackens and Blackwoods go to war, using Aegon and Rhaenyra's conflict as an excuse to slaughter each other. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenys advises Rhaenyra that to prevent a full-scale war, she must speak with Alicent directly. In King's Landing, Criston Cole plans a march to conquer Harrenhal, but Daemon has already arrived there. Upon his arrival, Sir Simon Strong, who holds Harrenhal, declares his support for Daemon. That night, Daemon stays at Harrenhal and is tormented by a dream of a young Rhaenyra, sewing Viserys' severed head back onto his body. Daemon wakes in terror to find Alice Rivers, the bastard daughter of House Strong, who tells him that he will die in this place. With war looming, Rhaenyra sends Rhaena and her younger children along with 3 dragon eggs to the Vale to ensure the survival of the Targaryen line. After the incident with Sir Arryk, Rhaenyra has made Mysaria her advisor. In King's Landing, Aegon appoints Larys Strong as his Master of Whisperers. Later, at a brothel, a man named Ulf claims to be Daemon's half-brother. Just then, Aegon arrives with his squires. He spots Aemond with Madame Sylvie and begins to mock him ruthlessly in the Riverlands. Baela, flying on a dragon, Moondancer, spots Criston Cole and his vanguard marching toward Harrenhal. Rhaenyra's council is informed, and they insist that this means war, urging her to deploy her dragons. But Rhaenyra quietly slips into King's Landing, disguised as a scepter, to meet Alicent. Alicent rejects the peace proposal, but Rhaenyra asks how her father, who had championed her as heir his entire life, could change his mind on his deathbed. Alicent mentions that Viserys spoke of Aegon and the prince that was promised. Rhaenyra immediately realizes that Viserys was not speaking of Aegon II, but of Aegon the Conqueror and his prophecy, a song of ice and fire. It had nothing to do with Alicent's son, but Alicent, refusing to admit her mistake, walks away. At Harrenhal, Daemon has another dream, where he beheads a young Rhaenyra who accuses him of high treason. In King's Landing, Grand Maester Orwell prepares an abortifacient tea for Alicent. Alicent asks the Grand Maester if he believes Viserys truly chose Aegon as his heir. The Grand Maester admits that Viserys never discussed the matter with him. Meanwhile, Criston Cole confronts Lord Gunthor Darklyn of Duskendale, who refuses to support Aegon. Cole promptly beheads him at Harrenhal. Alice Rivers warns Daemon that the castle is haunted and gives him a strange potion upon drinking it. Daemon envisions his late wife, Laena Velaryon, at Dragonstone. Rhaenyra is informed of the executions at Duskendale. She finally agrees to deploy her dragons. Rhaenys volunteers to fly her red dragon, Meleys, to confront Cole's army at Rook's Rest. In King's Landing, Aegon complains to Alicent that Aemond and Criston are planning battles behind his back. Alicent coldly tells him to sit quietly on the throne he was given and do nothing. Frustrated and drunk, Aegon dons his armor and flies out on his golden dragon Sunfire, heading for Rook's Rest. Cole's army is outside Rook's Rest when Rhaenys arrives, raining fire down upon them. This was Cole's trap. He wanted Rhaenyra to send a dragon so Aemond and Vhagar could ambush it. But Aemond, seeing Aegon arrive on Sunfire, holds back. Rhaenys and the experienced Meleys begin tearing into Aegon and Sunfire. Aegon is in grave danger. Just then, Vhagar enters the sky. Aemond orders Vhagar to unleash fire, engulfing both dragons in flames. Sunfire plummets with Aegon. Vhagar also crashes to the ground, but Meleys and Rhaenys remain airborne. Rhaenys turns to escape, but decides to fly back and confront Vhagar. A brutal clash ensues, and Vhagar overpowers Meleys, sending Rhaenys and her dragon falling to their deaths on the ground. Criston Cole regains consciousness and searches for Aemond. He finds Aemond standing over Aegon's body with his sword drawn, but Aemond sheathes it when Cole approaches. Cole finds Aegon severely burned and near death. Corlys Velaryon, his granddaughter Baela, and Queen Rhaenyra are devastated by Rhaenys' death. In King's Landing, Criston Cole parades the severed head of Meleys through the streets, but the starving citizens view this as a terrible omen. The Gullet blockade is causing severe famine, and the people have nothing to eat. Aegon has survived, but is unconscious and severely burned. His dragon, Sunfire, is also mortally wounded. Alicent confronts Criston, realizing she was kept completely in the dark about the true plan. Meanwhile, Daemon's haunting visions continue at Harrenhal, where he sees his late mother, Alyssa Targaryen. It is a deeply unsettling vision in which Alyssa calls Daemon her favorite son at King's Landing. Alicent proposes that she be named Regent during Aegon's recovery, but the small council rejects her, deciding that Aemond is a more suitable regent because he is a male and a dragon rider. As regent, Aemond immediately orders the gates of King's Landing closed, trapping the starving citizens inside, including Hugh Hammer and his family. In the Vale, Jane Arryn is furious, telling Rhaenyra that she expected large, formidable dragons to defend House Arryn, not tiny hatchlings. Meanwhile, Prince Jaehaerys arrives at the Twins, where he secures the alliance of House Frey by promising them Harrenhal. The Freys agree to open the passage for the Northern Winter Wolves in King's Landing. Myzaria's spy, Elinda, spreads rumors and instigates unrest among the starving smallfolk. At Harrenhal, Daemon declares that he will crown himself king once he raises a large enough army. He orders the Blackwoods to ravage Brackenlands to force their surrender. Alice Rivers warns Daemon that this will end poorly, and she is right. The River Lords are horrified by the atrocities and refuse to join Daemon. At Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is desperate because they have no counter to Vhagar. Jace suggests that they have two massive riderless dragons, Vermithor and Silverwing. They just need riders, and they can search for individuals with secret Targaryen or Valyrian blood. Lord Jason Lannister is marching his host toward Harrenhal and summons Aemond to join them on Vargar. Aemond refuses, ordering Criston Cole to march his army to Harrenhal instead to trap Daemon from two sides. Aemond also sends Tyland Lannister to negotiate an alliance with the Triarchy to break the Valyrian blockade at the Gullet. On top of that, Aemond banishes his mother, Alicent, from the small council. At Dragonstone, Sir Steffon Darklyn, a distant relative of the Targaryens, is summoned to claim Seasmoke, but Seasmoke instantly incinerates him. At Harrenhal, Daemon's nightmares continue. This time, he sees his brother, Viserys, and begins to suspect that someone is poisoning him. In King's Landing, Aemond tells Larys to recall his grandfather, Sir Otto Hightower, to serve as hand once again. Meanwhile, Aegon is slowly recovering. When Aemond visits, Aegon claims he remembers nothing of the battle. Alicent's brother, Gwaine Hightower, is preparing to march toward Harrenhal with Criston Cole. Before leaving, he tells Alicent that her third son, Daemon, is nothing like his brothers Aegon and Aemond and is kind-hearted. Meanwhile, Corlys Velaryon appoints his unacknowledged son, Alyn of Hull, as first mate of his flagship. Elsewhere, Alyn's brother, Adam, is cornered by Seasmoke, the dragon of Corlys's late son, Laenor, in King's Landing. Mysaria spreads rumors that while the poor starve, the royals in the Red Keep feast regularly. She then sends boats laden with food, bearing Rhaenyra's black Targaryen banners, directly to King's Landing. The starving citizens are grateful, but the limited supplies trigger a massive riot. Alicent and Helaena narrowly escape with their lives at Dragonstone. Mysaria reveals her tragic past to Rhaenyra and explains why she is fiercely loyal to her. They share an intimate moment, but are interrupted by news that Seasmoke has chosen a new rider. Rhaenyra immediately flies out on Syrax to find the intruder. Rhaenyra confronts Adam of Hull, demanding to know his intentions. Adam kneels, explaining that he did not steal the dragon, but that the dragon chose him. He declares Rhaenyra his queen, promising to serve her. Rhaenyra is astonished. Meanwhile, Alicent, banished from the council, retreats to the Kingswood in King's Landing. Larys urges Grand Maester Orwyle to hasten Aegon's recovery. He also builds Aegon's resolve, warning him not to take milk of the poppy for his pain, explaining that while it kills the pain, it will cloud his mind. In the Vale, Rhaenyra discovers a wild dragon living in the mountains and slips away from her group to find it, with Adam successfully riding Seasmoke. Rhaenyra searches the old scrolls for other potential dragon seeds. Mysaria explains that searching for Targaryen bastards among the common folk of King's Landing is their best option. Rhaenyra agrees and sends Elinda and Alyn to smuggle the dragon seeds out of King's Landing, including Ulf and Hugh. Rhaenyra brings the gathered dragon seeds before the massive dragon Vermithor. Vermithor unleashes absolute terror, burning the dragon seeds one by one in a desperate bid to save a woman. Hugh Hammer stands his ground. Vermithor accepts him as his rider. Meanwhile, fleeing the carnage, Ulf stumbles upon Silverwing, who accepts him as well. Ulf flies Silverwing over King's Landing, prompting Aemond to immediately pursue on Vhagar. But as they approach Dragonstone, Aemond is forced to retreat, seeing Rhaenyra standing on the cliffs, flanked by three massive dragons. The season finale begins with Tyland Lannister arriving in Essos to win the alliance of the Triarchy. The Triarchy, already bitter enemies of Corlys and Daemon, possess a massive armada. In exchange for their fleet, they demand the Stepstones and challenge Tyland to defeat Admiral Shirako Lohar in combat. In King's Landing, Larys informs Aegon of Rhaenyra's new dragons. He convinces Aegon that they must immediately flee to Braavos, where Larys has already secured Harrenhal's gold. Once Rhaenyra and Aemond destroy each other, Aegon can return to claim his throne. In the Vale, Rhaenyra finally tracks down the wild dragon. Meanwhile, Gwaine Hightower draws his sword on Criston Cole, revealing he knows about Cole's affair with Alicent. Cole remarks that none of it matters, because once the dragons dance, there will be nothing left. Humiliated by Rhaenyra's display, Aemond burns the town of Sharp Point on Vhagar. At Dragonstone, Rhaenyra, advised by Corlys, prepares to launch a coordinated attack with her dragons to end the war swiftly. She promises to knight the new riders, but Ulf's arrogant behavior quickly irritates Jace. Corlys tries to mend relations with Alyn, but Alyn angrily asks where Corlys was when he and his brother Adam were starving. Rhaenyra receives an urgent message from Sir Simon Strong warning her that Daemon has raised a massive Riverlands host and that treason may be brewing. Rhaenyra flies to Harrenhal alongside Adam. At Harrenhal, Alice leads Daemon to the weirwood tree. Daemon touches the tree and witnesses a vision of the future. He sees the threat of the White Walkers, the necessity of Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons, the Bloodraven, dead dragons, and Helaena. In King's Landing, Aemond demands that Helaena fly into battle on Dreamfire. Helaena refuses, declaring she will not shed blood. She warns Aemond that he will die in this war, and that Aegon will return to sit on his wooden throne. Rhaenyra arrives at Harrenhal. Daemon kneels before her, declaring her his queen in front of the assembled host. He explains that they are merely playing their parts in a grand story to keep the realm united. Rhaenyra is relieved to hear Daemon speak with the same wisdom as her father. The Riverlands are now ready to march for Rhaenyra. Back at Dragonstone, Alicent secretly arrives to meet Rhaenyra. She confesses her mistakes and promises that if Rhaenyra spares her and her family, she will surrender King's Landing. As soon as Aemond leaves for Harrenhal, Rhaenyra insists that Aegon must still die. The season ends with a montage. Otto Hightower is shown imprisoned. The Hightower host marches with Daemon Targaryen. The Stark Winterwolves march south. The Lannisters advance. Daemon's Riverlords set out. The Velaryon fleet stands ready at the Gullet, and Tyland leads the Triarchy fleet toward the blockade. War has officially begun. So guys, that was the recap of Season 2 of House of the Dragon. I saved you several hours while keeping all the critical details intact. I am incredibly excited for the new season, and I want to know, what was your favorite moment from last season? And which side do you support, the Blacks or the Greens?